Jews were basically welcomed into the Pale of Settlement. It wasn't called that yet, but into Poland and that whole area. Western Europe had basically kind of run them out at that point, so the Jews in Europe were looking for a place to go. This is still a very feudal area. You've got estates with serfs on them that cannot leave. Like, these serfs are owned by noblemen. These noblemen, they don't live out on their farms out in the middle of the Ukrainian breadbasket. They live in Kiev, they live in Odessa, they live in some of these other culture cities. And so what they would do is they would lease out either the rights to it so that people could run mills and other things, or hire out estate managers who would go out there and run the things and give them sort of a tax on it. They would basically live in the cities and then hire intermediaries to control their serfs. And that ended up being Jews a massive part of the time. This was the traditional way that Jews would move into a territory. It wasn't like you could just immigrate into somebody's kingdom or something like that back in the day. Like, you show up to Ellis Island and fill out the paperwork and now you're a part of the French kingdom or something. Like, that's just not how it worked. It wasn't like an individual Jew rolled up to some place and said, "Hey, can I join your country?" It was whole communities moving. So they move into a territory and they send somebody to the nobility or whoever's the authority there, and they say, "Look, we got a lot of things that we can do for you. We can draw on capital networks that reach all the way to the Middle East. We can collect taxes for you. We can do all of these sort of advanced things that you would think of as being part of urban economic civilization that you can't really do yet. And so what do you say? Can we hang out here and work with each other?" They were outsiders. That was a huge part of it. It's very difficult to go among your serfs and just pick the guy who has the most social authority and stuff and put him in charge, because what if he has to hang somebody? What if he has to whip somebody? What if he has to go in and do some kind of harsh punishment to get people moving, or to go collect taxes on these people? It's a very difficult thing to do because he has more loyalty to the other peasants than he has to the absentee landlord. Well, they could send the Jews out there, and the Jews didn't care about these people at all. The Jews are a separate people altogether, and so they could go out there and run these places with a little more brutality and consistency than you would get out of somebody local if you just put them in charge. This middleman minority phenomenon is something that has actually existed in different parts of the world. There's Lebanese in South America and in the Caribbean and in West Africa. The Indians were brought into Uganda. You remember back in the 70s, Idi Amin kicked out like 60, 70,000 Indians. And you hear that, and you're like, what are 60 or 70,000 Indians doing in Uganda? There are a lot of very good reasons, if you're just looking at it in a sort of Machiavellian way, to do that. And one of the primary ones, and this happened in Western and Eastern Europe, is that, who is the face of the peasant's oppression? It's not the absentee landlord. The face of his oppression that he sees actually every day is a Jew. And that was the reality. And so when you had like this Khmelnytsky uprising, the Cossacks rose up and they start slaughtering Jews. That kind of gets held up today as, these just Ukrainians have this horrible, racial hatred of the Jews that's just in their blood somehow. Well, no, this was an uprising against their oppressors. It was brutal and horrible and awful, but that is what it was. And that really is the beginning of this just very hateful relationship between the peasantry in the Pale of Settlement and the Jews that lived there. The Russians were just a very powerful empire, and they were able to kind of control things for the most part. When they took over Poland and Lithuania and that whole area, they just inherited 3 million Jews into their empire. And over the course of the 19th century, that turned into 7-8 million Jews. And they confined them to the Pale of Settlement, which is basically this gigantic strip of land from the Baltic to the Black Sea. And a lot of people kind of hold that up today as if it's some sort of terrible anti-Semitic discrimination or something, not letting them move around. But that's completely the wrong way to think about it, because, the Russian Empire had Mongols, it had Ukrainians, it had Poles, it had all these different groups of people, and all of those people had a place to live. Well, now we have these millions of people that we've incorporated into our empire, and they don't have a homeland. And so, what are we going to do with them? And people might say, well, just why do anything with them? Let them go wherever. But the problem with that is one of the reasons that Western Europe ran the Jews off to begin with. Jews have been 90% urban for 2,000 years. Once Jerusalem was destroyed, everything became about studying the text, repeating the text, reading the text, sharing the text, and that Talmudic form of Judaism. And over the course of a couple thousand years, you've got a people who are, just very comfortable in an urban, literate, kind of abstract thinking society, money thinking, and all that kind of stuff comes very natural to them. If you just have this feudal serf economy, that's one thing. But now you're starting to get these towns, you're starting to get people who are moving into them as traders and merchants. They're starting to develop a local economy, but they're not experts at it yet. When all of a sudden, you just allow these millions of Jews who are extremely sophisticated about this stuff to go wherever they want, and they're going to go find that place, take over every industry, and it's going to cause problems because the people who are there are not just going to be okay with that. Well, that's what happened in the entire Pale of Settlement. Jews completely dominated every industry you could think of. It's literally, 80% of the railroads here and 70% of the mills over there and just up and down the line. I mean, after the peasants just went after the Jews in 1881 after the assassination of the Tsar, that's when everything changed, and they really doubled down on the relationship that they had had to the peasants in the Russian Empire ever since the Ukrainian uprisings. When you start to get into the Soviet Union and, the predominantly Jewish secret police going after the Ukrainian peasantry and the Holodomor and stuff like that, it's not just a matter of coincidence that the Kiev secret police was 75-80% Jewish. You've got a bunch of people who hate these Ukrainians, and now they have an opportunity to kind of get into a position where they can take power over them. So the assassination happens in 1881, and these pogroms break out all over the place, and two things start to happen. One is that the kind of revolutionary socialist type Jews, they say, fuck the peasantry, and they start focusing on the urban proletariat, which benefits them more anyway because there's not any Jewish peasants out there. And the other thing that happens, the people who don't want to do any of that, a different group says, you know what? No, the problem is not that we need to change the system of this country somehow. The problem is that we're in these people's country. That is the problem. And it's not going to go away anytime ever. Now that this sort of age of national identity has started to come along, we just need to go get our own country. That's what we lost, and it's changed us as a people, and none of this is going to change until we rectify that.